Al-Qaeda is a shadow of what it used to be, but it doesn't mean it's the end of it.
Now, the US President Joe Biden has confirmed the death of al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri by a CIA drone strike in Kabul. Zawahiri was considered as America's most wanted terrorist and, along with bin Laden, plotted the 9/11 attacks together. Well, let's get a bit of analysis on this story. Joining me now are Farah Pandith, adjunct senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and author of How We Win. Farah is also a pioneer in the field of countering violent extremism. Welcome to the show, Farah.
Thank you so much.
And welcome to the show, Margaret Gilmore. Margaret is an independent security analyst and co-author of the book The Terrorist Hunters. Margaret, good evening. Welcome.
Good evening.
Margaret, I'm going to begin with you. Tell us a bit about Ayman al-Zawahiri and what is the consequences and the significance of his death?
He was always regarded as the sort of brains behind al-Qaeda, whereas Osama bin Laden brought the money and was the charismatic leader. So this man, he was intelligent. He was an eye surgeon himself. His father was a professor. He got involved in militancy in Egypt very young, and he set up his own Egyptian group eventually, and he then merged with al-Qaeda and became Osama bin Laden's number two. He would post hour-long sermons explaining the ideology behind everything that they were up to. And as I say, he was very much regarded as the brains, the operational brains behind and the mastermind behind 9/11. So he survived Osama bin Laden, took over as leader, but al-Qaeda, without the charisma of bin Laden, didn't really thrive in the same kind of way. At the same time, while Osama bin Laden was a household name, Zawahiri was not so much of that. He was also neurotic about being tracked down, so he became more and more reclusive. So I think the impact of all this is very much symbolic. And al-Qaeda is a shadow of what it used to be, but it doesn't mean it's the end of it.
Yes, and I think that's a very important point, is it not, Farah? I mean, what do you think this means now in terms of what's happening in Afghanistan? We spoke earlier with a journalist who said that there's no question that Afghanistan is becoming a bit of a magnet, a haven, or even a containment zone for terrorist activity. Is this killing? Do you think that's going to stimulate that sort of, grouping of terrorists and to stimulate terrorist activity?
Well, the fear last year when the US left was that Afghanistan was going to become a lighthouse and a safe haven for extremist groups. And that prediction has been true. In addition to that, we have a region that is not isolated from the threat of what's happening in Afghanistan. Pakistan obviously has a really important role to play in terms of being a safe haven. But more importantly, I think what we have to think about is what the threat is from groups like al-Qaeda. While the group is diminished, no question about it, the fact is that this killing provides an opportunity for whoever that new leader is to think about what they want to do next. How do they adapt to the current landscape? While we don't know who that new leader is, Zawahiri was a caretaker to bin Laden. This next leader could be somebody who is thinking in a more strategic way, thinking about how to make sure that they're taking advantage of their core ideology and are able to recruit millennials and Gen Z. This next leader may be thinking strategically about how to ramp up funds and training around the world. This next leader may also think more strategically about the partnerships they want to build. So the danger here is not over just because Zawahiri is dead.
I mean, that is such an important point, Farah, hugely important point there. And Margaret, just picking up on what Farah was saying, I mean, where do you think this next leader is coming? Where is this person coming from? And, to some of Farah's points, what do you think their ideology is going to be? Where do you think they're going to want to base themselves? What do you think their sort of mission is going to want to be?
I think, historically, they have always been very centralist. They had a very strong ideology. The center always had to rubber stamp everything. And, people would need to know, and they had very sort of cell structured way of working. And all of that was seen through 9/11 and through some of the big attacks in the years that followed. I think you're absolutely right when you say there that along came ISIS, and ISIS seemed to take the ideology and of the young and offered something to the young which was more immediate, which got rid of the hour-long sermons, which offered a completely different type of lifestyle change and made young people believe they could change the world. And that was all done. Again, this all came out of al-Qaeda. You had al-Baghdadi, who was running al-Qaeda in Iraq. He got frustrated and he then set up ISIS in Syria, and he made that the big militant terrorist extremist brand, really, and al-Qaeda became quiet. So I think what we'll see now is al-Qaeda will surely be looking back to its roots, to its ideology, to in for the long game, in for the long term. The planning, for example, of 9/11 took many years. I think they'll be looking at that. But at the same time, because of the way al-Zawahiri has been leading, because of the way he has taken a background step, really. You've had al-Qaeda move into franchises. So al-Qaeda is quite strong in Somalia, for example. It's quite strong in Yemen. And I wouldn't be surprised if a kind of strong leadership emerged out of one of those. I think it will remain in the Middle East. I think Afghanistan is its traditional home, but you might see somebody emerging from either there or either one of those two countries, or Afghanistan remaining in the Middle East, looking back at its original roots and seeing if it can somehow build up its brand again if it chooses to. I think there's always the worry that al-Qaeda could be, something that is in for the long term, not just a short-term thing, and will come back. And that's why a new leader can survive and can make it different and can make it stronger in a way that ISIS was much more short-term. Not that ISIS has gone away either.
No, of course. And then Farah, in terms of, talked about this new leader and this next generation. I mean, and I'm sure this is happening in many, many Western countries as well. We've had a big discussion in the UK about young people getting groomed online, getting radicalised online. We've had a very high profile case, a young woman, Shamima Begum, who went out. Do you think a new leader is going to mean that there will be a stimulation of trying to sort of groom young people in Western countries as well?
Let's be really clear about a couple of things in the last almost 21 years since 9/11. We know that the physical components of these groups matter, to be able to go after the cells, to dismantle them, to make sure we follow the money, all of these things we know in spades. We also know that these terrorist organizations cannot be who they are if they don't have ideological soldiers. And so the practical and rational thing from that analysis is that they have to be looking at the next generation of their ideological soldiers. And we learned the hard way with ISIS that, in fact, if you got a group that was sophisticated, that were digital natives, that knew how to use memes and videos, that knew how to brand themselves, that they could find adherents. And the danger today is not just al-Qaeda or ISIS or the Taliban or Shabab. It is that this ideology has no borders. And we know that to be true, not just with organizations that use the name of Islam to recruit, but we see that with groups that are neo-Nazis, and we see that with groups that are raising money and ideological soldiers in America and in Europe. So when you ask the question, what's coming from the perspective of the ideology of us versus them, whatever shape that might be, I would say to you that there are too many young people out there for us to look away and think this is past us. We have no problems ahead. This is the moment to rekindle our interest in how to fight the ideology of hate and extremism, to go all in, both governments and civil society, and importantly, technology companies, and to say, what have we learned about the radicalization process? What's taking place with the algorithms? You rightly point out cases that are in the news today of young people who are being groomed and recruited. But let's be clear, nothing happens online that doesn't first happen offline, meaning these young people are asking questions about their identity and about how they belong, and that happens in society. So what does this mean for all of us today? While al-Qaeda is ascendant, again, because it's in the news and people might think that's the threat that we're looking at, we've got to think more broadly about how to protect young people from the dangers and the threats of that ideology.
Well, listen, it's one absolutely fascinating conversation. It's been so illuminating to get your insight and your expertise. My huge thanks to Farah Pandith, Senior Fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations and author of How We Win. She's a pioneer in the field of countering violent extremism. And Margaret Gilmore, who is an independent security analyst and co-author of the book, The Terrorist Hunters.